Hi, I'm Allison, CEO of Bothered Stories, and this is Smut Talks. Join me for candid conversations with leading voices about smut, desire, the patriarchy, and the cultural forces shaping the stories we love. Let's get bothered.
Hi, I'm Allison Whaley, CEO of Bothered Stories, and we're a site for smart, smutty fiction. If you haven't checked us out yet, go to botheredstories.com today. And of course, like the rest of the world, we are obsessed with Heated Rivalry. And what I'm personally interested in is not just the show, although I love the show, but it's what its breakthrough and wild success means for our culture, for romance and smut as a genre. And I want to get into all of that. I have brought the most incredible roster of people together to talk about Heated Rivalry with me today. We've got 4 amazing guests in the room, and we're going to get into the popularity of Heated Rivalry, what its craze reveals, and what makes it work so well. So let me introduce this panel. First, I'll introduce Julie Murphy. She's a New York Times best-selling author of a number of novels. You may know her for her young adult book, Dumpling, which was adapted into a Netflix show. She also has co-written 2 novels with Sierra Simone, which brings me to my second panelist, Sierra. Welcome. Sierra is a best-selling author known for her boundary-pushing erotic romance, including fan favorites like the Priest series, the new Camelot series, a favorite of mine, and her stories often feature male-male romance and kink. Julie and Sierra just co-wrote a book. It's out on shelves now. If you haven't picked it up yet, run, don't walk. It's called Fundamentals of Being a Good Girl, and I'm personally very excited to read it. Then we've got Jane Boon. Welcome, Jane. Jane is the author of acclaimed erotic fiction novels Edge Play and Bold Strokes. With a focus in her work on kink and BDSM themes, her recent TikTok videos on Heated Rivalry just dive into all of the sex and the kink. So check those out if you're interested in that. And finally, we have Meg. She's the co-host of the First Dates and Soulmates podcast, which is a podcast on all things romance. They have released 3 very fun episodes dedicated to Heated Rivalry. So if you're listening to this and you want more, go to First Dates and Soulmates and just listen to those episodes. I loved them. And Meg is also a romance author writing as Bailey Seaborn. All right. Welcome, everybody. It's great to have you. And let's just jump right into it. Okay, I'm going to start out light. We're going to keep it easy. I want to know what you all loved about Heated Rivalry. Take it wherever you want to take it. It could be a specific moment from the show. It could be more of a meta level comment on cultural observations, whatever speaks to you. What did you love about Heated Rivalry? And I'm going to jump to you, Julie. Why don't you kick it off for us?
Sure. I think my favorite thing, honestly, I mean, besides all of the parts where their bodies made noises, I really, really was surprised and just so delightfully overjoyed by how funny it was in a really quiet and subtle way. The very specific type of humor that plays out for both Shane and Ilya is so specific to each of their characters, what their own character sense of humor would be. And I just think it's really, I don't know, it's the type of humor that creates character development and also just makes everything feel more intimate. You feel you know these characters so much more because you know every little thing that they're sarcastic about or the things they like to nudge each other about and give each other a hard time about. I just love it. I love when humor is used for something like that and in a show or a book that could at times feel heavy.
Totally. I love it. Yeah, I love that too. And I love that you pointed it out. And it is subtle. I'm thinking of the last episode where Hollander makes 8 hamburgers and Rosenoff is why did you make 8 hamburgers? And they just they're a little back and forth about that, moments
well, it's because Shane Hollander's autistic and he can only follow the directions.
Right. So it revealed a little bit more of his character as well and was funny.
I've also been walking around saying lovers to Sierra Simone for the last 2 months, basically now, lovers. And every time she says something when is this deadline? I just say, is liar told you that.
Is lie the deadline. Okay, Sierra, Julie just called you out a little bit. So let's just jump to you. What are your favorite takes?
I am going to go back to what Julie said, where she likes all the parts where their bodies are slapping together. I actually really loved having a story that was sex forward and where the intimacy was the spine of the plot. I think it was after maybe the first two episodes released, there was an article, and I cannot remember where it was from. It was like Deadline or Collider or somewhere like that. And the reviewer was sort of like, well, I'm sure this is titillating, but, really the show would have been much stronger if the entire season had been a will they, won't they, and then had ended in a kiss. I can see you guys shaking your heads. You probably had seen this. And I remember just being like, okay, you're not allowed near our stuff. Like, we never get stuff like this, and this is not for you. It was such a revelation to see a delicate, emotional, like just engaging a nuanced story where intimacy was the driver of the plot. That was the plot. The plot wasn't hockey. The plot wasn't will they, won't they. The plot was, how do you build emotional intimacy with someone that you're already physically intimate with? And actually, that makes things worse. Like, actually, that makes things harder and more complicated to have already forged this connection and then not be able to talk about your feelings for 8 years. And I just think it's like, that took so much like commitment to the vision for Jacob Tierney to do, and I adore him for it.
Can I go next to piggyback on that?
Yes, Meg. I see you nodding your head. You got to go.
I'm like chomping, ready to go on this, because I think that the way that romance is typically adapted is what Sierra just described as like, that's the ideal form, is we have this slow burn and they will, they won't, they will, they won't, they. We have the Ross and Rachel. We have these rules that used to be laws, right? We have the Hays Code that was passed in the 30s to say, like, you can't have more than a 2-second kiss. You can't show couples in bed. You can't do all these things because it will create havoc in society. But we know that's bullshit. We know people have been having kinky sex for well before the 1930s, and they will continue to have it. And these rules are just artificial constructs. And I loved that this story and the adaptation was faithful to the novel. And the novel starts with them banging. Okay. So if we take that out and we don't, like, if you just take these characters that are Ilya and this one is Shane, and then we change it to whatever we want it to be as the adaptation, it's not an adaptation, it's fanfic. And that's not what the goal of this TV show is. So the fact that it was both true to the novels and treated with the respect that it deserved is what I loved about this adaptation.
What Meg just said speaks to the thing and the moment that captured my attention. So I must admit, I was a little skeptical. I read that it was sort of sex forward, but I was worried that the source material wouldn't be treated fairly, or that the sex would be kind of gross, or I just wasn't a believer. But then 10 minutes in, they're in the gym, they collapsed on the floor, and Ilya shakes the water bottle at Shane and then has him drink more. And then my antenna like went on high alert. I'm like, oh my God, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? This has all the electric charge of consensual power exchange. Holy fuck, is this on TV? And then obviously this is a thread throughout the show where Ilya is assertive and more savvy, and then Shane is, the submissive in the relationship, if we want to sort of go to a BDSM kind of framework. But it's very subtle, it's very playful, and it's so rare to see this kind of kink portrayed on the screen as something just loving people do because it gets them off. And it works for whatever reason. And the other thing that's sort of heretical and very novel is it's, two men. What that does is it neutralizes the gender shit. There's no ick, where we might see that same sort of power exchange happening between a man and a woman and think, is this the patriarchy at work, or is this something else? Where it can just be a loving expression of pleasure. So it just got me going. And after that water bottle, I was like locked in on the show.
Well, the water bottle scene happened, if I remember, it was like 15 minutes in or something. So like, Jane, it hooked you right away. Like you were
I was
in.
there. I was there. I was like, holy shit. What am I witnessing? I think I'm seeing Ferb on the screen and it's going to be great. So
Okay, I love this. Well, you guys like just dove right into the meaty stuff like right away. Like I thought we were going to go around and say like I loved this scene or this, but you lot like we're like getting into it. We're talking about patriarchy, we're talking about kink, we're talking about gender dynamics. So thank you, and I love it. I'll just share that for me, like some of the things that I loved about the show was the writing and some just these key, pivotal, cute moments. Like just every episode had them. Like I'm thinking of the episode with Scott and Kip, but I know some people love that they're there. Some people don't. I think they had to be there. But Scott and Kip, like even I remember when they get to the apartment after that night of catering, they're in Scott's apartment and it's unclear what's going to happen. And Scott starts taking his clothes off and he's like, do you want a tour or? And then Kip goes, I choose or like just like little moments like that. The writing, it just like gets me. And there was every episode had examples of that. Okay, so if you're listening to this and you've for some reason been living in a box and you're not so aware of Heated Rivalry and the Craze, I do just want to take a moment to orient you and talk about its breakthrough success and how it captured the cultural zeitgeist. And then we can segue that into like what that means. So HBO does not release viewership data. So we can't know like this number of people have actually watched the show, but we can surmise that based on the cultural chatter around it. And I did a Google search before this podcast episode, just looking for articles about Heated Rivalry. And what I found that it was that essentially every single publication, both major and minor, has written about it. There's not a single one that hasn't, from the New Yorker, New York Times to like GQ magazine, Men's Health. Everybody's commenting on it. Some of the fun facts that I have seen is in New York City, there have been these huge Heated Rivalry themed dance parties where they're projecting images of Hollander and Rosanov like all over the room. It looks amazing. And recently, this episode is being taped in January. The whole country just recently had a snowstorm. The New York City newly elected mayor gave a speech about the impending snowstorm where he urged all the New Yorkers, aka more than 8 million people, to download the Heated Rivalry ebook and read it. So basically, like you have the New York City mayor being like, please go read this queer smut right now. All 8 million of you. So like, I loved that. I ate it up. But I would love to hear from some of you all about the Heated Rivalry craze and how it showed up for you in your life. Like, I'm curious to hear, was there a pivotal moment for you all as, you know, voices in this romance and smut space where you realized like, oh, everybody's watching this. This is big. Like, this is a big deal. And Meg, maybe since you host a podcast, maybe I'll call on you first to speak to this a little bit.
Gladly. So I host a podcast with a Canadian co-host, and we have another Canadian who comes in. She's actually dual citizen Canadian American, so she's got both perspectives here. And we decided very early on, even before we knew the release date for Heated Rivalry, that we were going to do an episode about it because we loved the source material. We didn't know it was going to be a big thing, but this was part, you know, we do podcast planning 6 months in advance based on releases and who we know and what's coming up and all that. So we knew it. And I was like, okay, I live in upstate New York. I will just drive 80 miles to watch it with you in Canada, not knowing that it was going to be on HBO, right? This was always part of the plan. It was going to be fun. We were going to do a live one. And then I ended up not needing to go. She still had a big Heated Rivalry watch party, which like just sort of makes me uncomfortable to be like, wow, this is a little graphic to watch in a room full of 10 people. I don't know. So I'm glad it worked out that HBO picked it up. But we recorded that first episode just thinking it would be a regular episode. And within an hour, people were on our YouTube channel being like, please do the next episode. We've never had that kind of response. When I put the next episode, we, did do more episodes. We put them on Premiere and people were watching the premiere live to be in the chat box. And I was like, we've never had this kind of response to live content. I'd love to hear, kind of everyone else, but we have reels that have had over 100,000 views on them, thousands of responses where I'm just like, what's the moment that you think they recognize that they were in love with each other? Thousands of comments, and so I think for me, it wasn't even necessarily the media coverage. It was the direct parasocial relationship with other fans. who are saying, I thought it was the tuna melt that they fell in love, and I thought it was the kiss in the stairwell, and I thought it was the moment where they're jerking off together. And just like, everyone has an opinion, and we all just want to immerse ourselves in this material. So the conversations have been occasional trolls, but for the most part, like, some of the best commentary I've seen have been in the comment sections. And that for me was the moment where I was like, oh, this isn't just, oh, this surprised the media, so they're writing about it. This was a sea change movement in the way that romance is discussed and consumed.
I love that. And I think the quality of the comments is reflective of the quality of the content, right? Of the story that it created that.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
We did not get that response to people we meet on vacation. We did not get that response to our Hallmark movies. Like, we watch a lot of things together, and Heated Rivalry just blew everything else out of the water.
Okay, cool.
I was probably the last person of this group to watch it. I was wary of the material, to be honest. I was like, oh my God, it's going to be a tacky little thing. I was concerned that it wasn't going to be great, and I didn't want to watch it because I was worried I was going to be disappointed. And then my husband and I were in England for the holidays, for Christmas and New Year's. And then I started reading this swelling of information, and it dawned on me, it doesn't suck. Oh my God, I missed out on a moment. Holy shit, I got to get back to New York so I can see this thing. So as soon as we landed, basically, I binged it, which would have been, I don't know, maybe January 4th or 5th. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is shocking, because by then I had been immersed in the comment, the groundswell of the fan analysis. And I was just struck by how everybody was so invested, but had such thoughtful things to say about the relationship. I mean, I hadn't really partaken of fandom in that way, but I was like, these are all English majors desperate for a moment to weigh in on something in a way that's really super. This is great. And so I got sucked into the vortex.
That's a good way of putting it. I think we've all gotten sucked into the vortex. Yeah, I mean, and I think just to speak to the quality of it a little bit more and how it has taken people. Like, I had a male friend who watched it, and he said to me afterwards, he said, this is one of the most meaningful, complex, and interesting shows I've seen in years. And what struck me about him saying that was he is not a romance reader. He has never read a romance book in his life. He does not consider himself someone that watches romance TV shows. And yet that was his opinion on it. And so it was this moment where I realized, oh, this show is having a lasting impact on our culture. It's more than just like a show that people are watching. And that's actually what I want to talk about a little bit, because we've got this show that had no known actors and a very niche story. We've got hockey, we've got gay males, like that's quote unquote niche, and it became wildly successful. So what I want to know is, what does that say about romance as a genre, about people's appetite for it, about like what it can do? Like, just as someone that loves romance, and I love smut, and I've created a company around it, and we've got writers of romance and smut in the room. Like, to me, this says something, the success of Heated Rivalry. So, and I don't know who to ask. Julie, maybe I'll pop it over to you. And because, you've written both young adult romance, you've written adult spicy romance. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I have talked to Sierra a lot about this. First of all, like, romance keeps the lights on in publishing, regardless of whether or not it's young adult romance, like, high heat, low heat, whatever it is. It's the thing that's keeping the lights on. And it's the reason why we can pay, these other fancy writers exorbitant amounts of money for books that they're never going to earn out on, just because they win prizes and things like that. And so the last time I saw something become this much of a craze was Twilight. Mm-hmm. And that was, again, something written by women for women, or at least with like a female readership in mind, the female gaze in mind. And it's just, I don't know. I think it's just absolutely like thrilling to see something, because, okay, whether or not Twilight is a good adaptation is highly debatable. As someone who has a deep love for that entire series and like those movies, despite the fact that for some reason the entire first movie is just blue for some reason, like it was a Catherine Hardwicke vibe. I don't know. But anyways,
blue and sparkly. It is both. Man.
Yeah, it is. It is blue and sparkly. And like also like adaptations only a mother could love, like adaptations like a fangirl had to love. But you know, the whole series was then adapted and it was like on the backs of fangirls who obsessed over that first movie and saw it in theaters like, you know, 25 times. That wasn't me. I didn't see it in theaters 20 times. But anyhow, I have such bad ADHD and haven't taken my medication yet this morning, but I can tell you that Jacob Tierney reads romance, not only just based on like interviews he's done, but just as someone who has like watched this, consumed it. Like I watched the show and then I went back and read the entire series, and it is shocking to me like how many moments are direct like pulls from these books. I feel like so often we see these adaptations happen and they happen in spite of the book. It's almost like the people producing the adaptation are working against the source material because they're like somehow embarrassed by it. They find it cringy. But Jacob Tierney fully embraced the source material and made things that could have easily been cringy in the hands of anyone else really work and become really endearing. So I talk to a lot of like people in Hollywood regularly for like an aspect of my job, and so often we're told that like no one is buying romance in Hollywood is what they'll say unless it's romance plus. So it has to be romance plus something significant. So like romance plus something that feels like Yellowstone, romance plus like, you know, crime family, romance plus adventure, like whatever it is, there it has to be like romance plus multi-generational family trauma, like all these things it has to be plus. And I almost got like into like a knockdown drag out fight with an agent the other day because she was like, you know, the reason why Heated Rivalry, the reason why Heated Rivalry works is because it has the backbone of hockey. She was like, it's like Hunting Wives and how it has like the backbone of Texas. And I was like, no, Heated Rivalry works because like it, like what everyone was talking about earlier on in this discussion is because it doesn't ignore the fact that like sex is the plot, like sex is what's moving this relationship forward, and it's what everyone else is invested in. Like sure, hockey romance like has like it's an entire culture within romance, but also you could replace hockey with anything else in this book. You could make them librarians who meet at American Library Association once a year and are like in like a, you know, a death duel with each other over like the proper shelving methods, and this would still be just as like sexy.
I
Again,
would watch that too.
I don't remember what the question was because I just am incapable of holding more than one thing in my head at a time.
Okay, so A, thank you, Julie. That was wonderful and beautiful and elucidating. And B, it's making me think of you, Meg, and the conversation we had yesterday about TV and movies. Yeah, go for it.
I think, Julie, exactly to your point, when I think about like what is an adaptation of incredible source material that was so far Hollywoodized that it lost the core of what made it really lovely to readership is the Bridgerton adaptations. And every time, and I mean, it was adapted by Shonda Rhimes. Shonda Rhimes came up through Grey's Anatomy. She came up through Scandal, and then she took this source material and went, this already has an audience. What if we can make it something that people want to watch on Netflix? But she veered away from the source material, and part of it was some really interesting choices to say, what if we cast more inclusively? What if we make these adjustments to make it look less like a white focused Regency and more like a modern take on a review of that? But in doing so, she lost some of those major plot threads. She added in new, the team, the executive producers, whomever, screenwriters, they added in whole new things that weren't necessarily what was in the books. They took those fanfic Barbie dolls and moved them around their own doll houses because they went, well, people won't like that. And they treated it more like a prestige TV show instead of like a romance. And in doing so, there's huge reasons why the fandom rebelled against those adaptations, is because they knew how the story was supposed to go. And then there were just these new characters plunked in because we thought it would be more interesting. And we're just going to take out this whole subplot because we think it's boring. And, you know, we don't necessarily know what was happening in those writers' rooms, but those decisions were probably, to your point, Julie, we need it to move faster. We need it to be bigger. We need the set pieces to be larger. We need the hair pieces to be larger. We need this to be larger than life. And it lost the intimacy of a lot of those scenes. And one of the things that Heated Rivalry did was, because it was so close to the source material and it allowed the intimacy, that whole last episode has 4 people in it.
Well,
They
and
allowed you to just live at the cottage with them.
and what we're also seeing is that these romance stories don't need to be as big as Bridgerton. I mean, they did it like on a shoestring. I mean, 2 cameras, like minimal funds. I grew up in Canada, so I know what kind of budgets are available for TV shows up there. And, it's probably like, I don't know, a tenth of what a Bridgerton episode would cost. And yet that forced a kind of intimacy, a zeroing in on Shane and Ilya. And you don't need all this subplot. There's enough tension and development in story and character just by looking at these 2 gorgeous guys. I mean, there's so much to take in. We don't need all that other shit.
100%. And to Sierra's point earlier, like, that story is so good on its own that we don't need to push in more, and we don't need to stretch it out more and wait until that will they won't they moment, because that's what Hollywood expects, but that's not what this story is. The core of this story is it takes them over a decade to speak the truth of the situation.
In the hands of most people in Hollywood, I really think that they would have taken Ilya's family backstory and run with it and turned it into like this huge thing that was like the politics of his family and like the dirty cop aspect of his brother. And it would have been like all these dramatics having to do with this that have nothing to do with Ilya's character, which is the purpose of his family and the backstory and all of that. So I just, Sierra and I stumbled upon a TikTok last night that Tierney was saying, like, it was during the pandemic when he just started consuming smut and was listening to audio just like nonstop. And I think that like the adaptation speaks to that. It's like I've come across so many people who are like, like B-list celebrities, C-list celebrities who are just like, I want to write a romance because they hear that it's like the big hot thing right now. But really, they're just doing it because it is the big hot thing. And most of them have never even read a romance from start to finish. And so that's how so many of these adaptations reads. It's like, people who just have never read a book. And that's not the case with this one.
And I think also the way that they edited it was very respectful to the romance genre. They very easily could have taken this in the more like kind of thriller prestige side of things. And when Hollander's cross-checked and he's being taken off the ice, they could have fade to black. That's the end of the episode. But that's not how romance works. Romance will close the loop before they open the next one, but they will take care of the readers in a very different way. So we end that on the kiss. We end it on I'm going to the cottage. We don't end it on Shane's going to the hospital. I mean, some romance readers will push this. Sierra, I'm still a little mad about the way that American Queen ended. I was like, could we just have her have one wedding night before she gets kidnapped? But that's
absolutely
a
not.
thing.
This is what happens when you grow up on a diet of Lost in college, is that you're like, everything has to end with the title card. But I mean, actually referencing that, one of the things that I think is salient is that a lot of Western storytelling is sort of hewing to sort of like the hero's journey kind of like cosmology. And there was a really great book written like 5 or 6 years ago by Gail Carriger called The Heroine's Journey. And it sort of sets itself up as an alternative to the hero's journey, where the hero's journey is about a process of development and maturation that comes with conflict, battle, and glory, and that you then like return to your sort of like origin with that new glory, that triumph. And the heroine's journey is one of isolation to restoration. It's one of being sort of a separate piece that's unconnected to being fused and integrated with the people around you, with community. And I think that romance inherently takes this point of view, right? Because you start a romance with atomized characters, and by the end, whether it's a couple or a throuple or a polyamorous sextet, like by the end our protagonists are integrated into that community and they are stronger and better for it. Where in sort of the hero's journey paradigm, there is a sense of like individual valor, right? Like being sort of the Theseus character or the Perseus character is like it's made more gloried by the fact that you are alone and you're battling alone. The heroine's journey is different. The heroine's journey says, no, you're stronger with someone. You are better with someone else, with community. And romance, I think, with its emphasis on the happily ever after, where like this is the end point. The end point is integration and fusion. It has a different alternative. And so the fact that Jacob Tierney really respected that arc in the show, I think is what so many people are drawn to. This idea that we will know more about ourselves and that we will be more fulfilled and happier with someone when we are connected and intimate with people. And by intimacy, it doesn't have to be sexual necessarily. In this story, it is. And that is a source of strength and joy that is strong enough that we can end the story there. Where like a Liam Neeson movie, you end the movie after he's killed the wolves or whatever, or, you know, he's defeated the bad guys with a certain set of skills. That triumph is where you leave it. But in a romance, you leave it with two characters holding hands, driving a car into the sunset.
And in this case, it's two male characters. We can't ignore the fact that the gender stuff has been changed. And to see that kind of male bonding and intimacy is pretty shocking. And then to see it echoed in real life with the various actors. I mean, they're all living kind of the importance of interrelationships in a way that's pretty seductive to the viewer. I mean, it's very exciting to see this form of masculinity embodied, you know, whether it's the behind the scenes shots or, you know, where they're naked wearing their modesty garments. I mean, it's pretty compelling. I mean, I can't get enough of it.
Yeah, I actually just listened to this morning Wesley Morris, the New York Times critic at large, talk about the male-male relationship and the communication between them, and how Ilya and Shane in some ways kind of embody like a masculine vulnerability and a communication style and a way of being with each other that is aspirational for a lot of women to see, and to see, you know, to be able to see that and kind of look at that for much of the female viewership was just like a really lovely thing that we don't always get in real life.
I would argue that is only possible because like they're both alphas on the ice. Like the story permits us to kind of go there because the engineering of the characters makes that vulnerability permissible. It's kind of like the football phenomenon. You know, the captain of the football team can actually be a vulnerable guy in a way like the guy in the drama club can't be. And the fact that they're beasts is helpful, I think, for neutralizing some of the obvious sources of problem.
So this is a really nice segue into something I did want to talk about. So thank you, Jane, for bringing it up, which is the fact that this is a male romance. And a lot of the cultural chatter around Heated Rivalry that we've all read about in the news has been centered around why women like it so much. The thinking is it's two men, they're in love. Like, why are women, both straight women and gay women, like just eating this up and loving it? And a lot of people that, you know, aren't familiar with the romance genre, aren't familiar with romance, just, you know, have never heard of that before. And so, okay, Sierra, I kind of want to put you on the spotlight here because you have written a lot of novels that feature male-male relationships and erotica on the page. You also have a very loyal fan base that loves you for it. So can you tell me your take on this based on your own experience and kind of how you explain this and kind of respond to the commentary about it?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that people have been studying for decades, since the origin of Spurk fan fiction that was passed around in zines, conventions in the 70s and 80s. And I remember in like 2007 or something, I was, you know, responsibly imbibing alcohol and was responsibly imbibed quite a bit. And it turned out the person I was talking to had written their thesis in the appeal of fan fiction for women, particularly straight women. So this is something that, you know, has been really, you know, I think that there's been a lot of really interesting interrogations into it. And so I cannot hope to sort of accurately survey the whole field, but I have noticed there seem to be 3 threads that I see the most commonly, and like lots of readers have sort of overlapping versions of these threads, you know, so they're more like spheres, they're not mutually exclusive. So the first is what Jane has alluded to, which is that when you have a male-male pairing. You have, really stripped away the sort of inherent cultural context that creates a power imbalance, typically between a heterosexual couple, a man and a woman. And you now have two characters who are able to sort of express themselves without that baggage. So when Ilya is being a little dommy, right? Like we don't sort of have this immediate flare of concern,
Yep.
because this sort of dommy behavior is taking place in a context where they are equals. They recognize each other as equals. There's not sort of like an entitlement, right, to behave that way. This is just this character. And I think that that is something that is so refreshing to see. I think a lot of viewers and I think a lot of readers really have found it powerful to witness two characters who are able to enjoy each other and enjoy a context of consent to where even their moments that are a little bit emotionally toxic, where like they're sort of more in their like fuck buddy era, or, scenes that are like really physically intense, like you're getting to have the thrill of that with the reassurance that both of these people are people to each other. And I think that's really powerful. There is a sort of adjacent thread to that where, in the sort of platonic hierarchy of beings, men are sort of the most people-y of people, right? So like we have men and then we have women. And so a man loving a man in sort of the platonic hierarchy is the highest form of love, is a man loving another man. A man loving a woman, lower, and then two women loving each other, like why even bother talking about that? Like that's like just the lowest rungs on the ladder. And so in that inherited framework of sort of who inherently carries the most human dignity throughout the ages, that has been afforded to men. And so when we are watching two men together, there is a cultural residue of that is more appealing than, say, watching a sapphic romance, because we are watching the two most people-y people. Now, this is kind of a thread that I think is where we see the most conversation about, is this fetishizing? When women are consuming content, is it coming from a place of fetishization? And, that's not a claim that I dismiss out of hand, because a lot of that concern comes from queer men who are saying we feel, that this contingent online is objectifying what to us is deeply personal and important. And so I think that typically comes from this sort of idea that like when two men are together, not always, because like side sexuality is real, but there still is a penetration centric sexual relationship. And that there is a way that male romance can shape itself to heteronormative ideas in a way that sapphic romance is never going to quite be able to do. And so I think that there is that thread. And then there is another thread of just horny people who like watching everyone fuck. And so I think that is, that is where Julie and I find ourselves typically. Like we just love all pairings, like, FF, MMF, FFM. Like we just love it when people get together and they're hot and they want to put their mouths on each other and their crotches together. Like that is what we love. So I think that
Crotch forward,
right? Like we really love a crotch forward story. And so when I think about my readership or the viewership of Heated Rivalry and the fandom that book series has had since 2019, I really see like a mix of these sort of different elements. And I think that it's really hard to resist the sort of like think piece angle of like, here's why, and like give one prescriptive reason, when actually all of us are a mix of our own interests, our own kinks, and how far we are into sort of stripping away our own cultural residue about, gender roles and stuff like that.
That was a beautiful answer. Thank you so much, Sierra. You've given me a lot to think about. I want to run with this.
Can I add one
yes,
more?
Jump in, please,
Meg. I think I haven't actually. Oh, I'm raising my hand. I haven't actually seen that much in the commentary, which is that women's bodies are difficult for ourselves, and we don't always like to be in our own bodies. And whether people are struggling with perimenopause or infertility or just really like uncomfortable moments in our own bodies. And we don't necessarily want to see that reflected on the page, but we can still see a sexual relationship without needing to have a uterus or a vagina involved. There is something really great about not needing to see our own bodies on the page. So I want to recognize that too, that like, sometimes it's not just, oh, look at those two people, they're hot, or I want to be able to watch that, but it's also like, I don't want to have to imagine my own self in that scenario. I want to be able to escape from, maybe I'm having my own pain, my own discomfort in my body, and I want to see love reflected in a way that is not my own.
I'm so glad you said that, Meg, because that actually was the thesis of the person I got drunk with in like 2007 was the psychological difference, the psychological space that gives someone. And it was for a variety of reasons. So there, she studied girls who were, more like high school, college age, who actually hadn't had any physical encounters yet. And so there was a sort of maybe like an anxiety or a nervousness. And so the fan fiction gave them a space to engage with that without like having to bring their own nervousness into them. And for a lot of people, body issues like body dysmorphia, certain kinds of gender dysmorphia, like there was just a lot that was afforded by being able to sort of create that space between the protagonists and yourself.
And actually, I think that space is the thing that works so well with the show writ large. So, okay, so I look for the pervy stuff and it's there, but it's at a respectful level. It's not clobbering anybody over the head. I mean, the only thing that's sort of in your face is the pleasure and desire these two men feel for one another, while everything else is just sort of an undercurrent. And it's there if you want it. It can be invisible to you if you find that stuff doesn't float your boat. I mean, I was surprised there were people, weighing in on my TikToks. There's no kink in this. I'm like, are we watching the same show? But if they don't see it, it doesn't work for them. It doesn't need to be there. And so the sort of the slight remove, the slight downplay of some of the stuff that might otherwise be clobbering you over the head. I mean, I think of some of the other stories where BDSM is a feature and you wonder, oh my God, this person's a stalker. How can they have this portrayal of something so unhealthy? When it's just sort of bubbling away, it can just seem like good, clean fun. And that depiction of pleasure is pretty exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. And I was talking to a different male friend of mine than the one I referenced earlier. This is a gay male friend. And his one major complaint about Heated Rivalry was that all four men portrayed were so hot. Like their bodies just looked so good. And he was like, as a gay man myself, that's just unrealistic. And I didn't appreciate that that's the characters they chose. And I was like, very offended because I was like, how do you think women have felt for decades as we've watched movies and TV shows? Like, just anyway.
When they have to make Charlize Theron and Rachel McAdams ugly, maybe we should rethink our casting decisions.
Right, exactly. Okay, so we're gonna move towards wrapping it up, but I do have one more thing I want to talk about because we in this group keep using the words crotch forward, which by the way, that is the first time I've ever said those words together, crotch forward. So thank you. I'll say it again, crotch forward. Heated Rivalry is far and away, in my opinion, the spiciest in terms of crotch forward, explicit graphic sex scenes show that has ever had such widespread viewership. I haven't fact checked that. I don't know. Maybe another show exists, but I don't think so. Like, can anybody think of one? I don't think so.
So the L Word was pretty high heat. I don't know if anyone remembers the L Word or watched the L Word, but there's definitely like other shows out there that have been high heat, but I think this is the one that's like most universal. Like this is the show that your parents are most likely to be like, have you heard of that Heated Rivalry show? Yeah, my parents weren't walking around.
So,
like
and they're so unapologetic about all the ass shots. I mean, we're given permission by the actors themselves to objectify them. I mean,
yeah.
Okay, so so this is like my question is, it's Heated Rivalry, in my opinion, is the show that's had such widespread viewership for being so graphic and explicit. We've never had a show like that that's reached that kind of popularity. What does that mean? Like, are we all just crazy for more sex and the publication companies and the content companies haven't caught up yet? You know, I'm thinking of like the novel 50 Shades of Grey, which I know we might have opinions about, but it's been one of the most like widely grossing novels of all time. It hit mainstream appeal and it was full of sex. So like, I'm just over here wondering, like, why don't we see more of this? Will we see more of it? You know, what does it mean that it was so graphic and so well loved broadly? I don't know who to ask. Does anyone?
I hope we see more of it. I hope we see more, right? And not just because it's sexy and hot, but because it's telling a fucking story.
Right.
This isn't just porn that they put on Crave and then move to HBO. HBO has plenty of porn. Cinemax has plenty of porn. This was not porn. This was a love story. This was a romance, and it had sex in it. And the sex moved the plot. Yes, I would
Right.
love to see more of that. I would love to see that be, and this respect for a genre that, to Julie's point, like pays the bills of publishing. This is the most popular genre in the planet. And it gets looked down upon because it's read by women. And this is maybe, I don't know if it will actually change anything in Hollywood, because who knows, it's still run by white men. But this is a sign. This is a very strong cultural signal that like we can handle more. We can handle something that's a real story with real stakes. And it doesn't need to be watered down for the Hallmark Channel.
There's money in this. And by the way, as you note, in a certain space, the story exists to serve the sex. But in this space, the sex exists to serve the story and to eliminate aspects of the character. And that is what is so fascinating and fun about it. I mean, they take it seriously and they deliver what clearly there's an appetite for.
I think of the Saturday Night Live skit from like 10 years ago where I think it was Andy Samberg was the 13-year-old boy on the set of Game of Thrones to make sure there were enough boobs in every episode. He was the like boob consultant. And to me, that is such a good encapsulation of how big media has treated sex and nudity for so long, which is in this very sort of male gazy way. And it either is gratuitous and male gazy, so there's like sort of like an exploitative like vibe to it, or I'm thinking of like a movie like Nicole Kidman's Baby Girl, where it's treated in this very sort of lit fic way, right, where it's this like, we're going to study the human condition about what would make this, you know, nice woman want this. And Julie and I watched it and I was like, there's so much that I really enjoy about this movie and that I really think is really fun and interesting. But the overall tone of the movie was that like, well, we have to put this person under, you know, under a microscope and just sort of watch them in a petri dish because, you know, this is about the human condition. There was nothing sort of playful about it, right? Even though you're supposed to be watching people play. And so I hesitate to use the term female gaze when it comes to Heated Rivalry because we have Jacob Tierney at the helm. So maybe it is just the sheer dent of having a queer gaze. But I felt like Heated Rivalry showed us the potential for storytelling about human sexuality in a way that is playful, in a way that is affirming of the human dignity inside of us, and in a way that is just like hot. And I think that like a great example is the water bottle scene that we mentioned earlier. The way the camera moves to be like, we're looking at thighs now, you know, we're looking at the throat when it swallows. And the camera is like, yes, I'm interested in the same things you're interested in, but I'm going to assume that all you're interested in is taint. Like, I think that you want to see these characters' faces as they come together. I think you want to see the look in their eyes when, you know, they're making love for the first time, because so much of what is erotic about sex is connection. Like penetration is cheap. Orgasms are cheap. What is deeply sensual and human about it is what those orgasms and penetration or touch or friction accomplishes for us on like an emotional and like spiritual level.
So what I'm hearing is we can be love first and crotch forward.
You
don't have to choose.
Yeah, exactly. Crouch forward can lead to the love. You know what I mean? Sierra and I
By the
always
way,
say,
We all been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And to me, like what I loved about Heated Rivalry, it was love first, it was crotch forward, and deeply meaningful, complicated themes got to rise up within that space for the reader and the viewer. Okay, I'm gonna wrap us up. We're at the top of the hour, and I just have a really simple question, and you can take it wherever you want to. I just want to know, what do you want to see more of from here? What do you hope happens post Heated Rivalry craze? Like, what comes from this? And Julie, I'm going to pop it over to you and let you kick us off.
Okay, I mean, obviously, like I want to see more romance, and I want Hollywood to really understand why Heated Rivalry worked and replicate that, and not just look at all the pieces that they think it is and try to pull those pieces together. Obviously, like I want to see more high heat, I want to see more romance and things like that. But I actually think what really made Heated Rivalry work was the casting. And I want to see more thoughtful casting, because like they didn't have the budget to go with like big names or anything like that. And it's so often that like when you get an adaptation, in order for a producer to get that greenlit, they will find the biggest names they can find and essentially do like plug and play. What names are going to like hit the button so that we can get this greenlit? And that doesn't always result in the best casting or actors who are excited about like a romance adaptation that might be a little bit more physical than they're comfortable with or things like that. But like for whoever did this casting to have found these two people who have such like incredible chemistry on and off screen, like that is an art. Like that at that point, you are not just like creating a spreadsheet of people who are signing up for an audition. Like you are really searching out two people who have a connection. And just it's so freaking obvious. Like I feel like so many romances flop because the connection is just not there. The chemistry isn't there.
Thank you for mentioning that. And those two characters, they play their role, each of their individual roles, so well. Who wants to jump in next? What do you want to see more from here? What do you hope happens post Heated Rivalry craze?
I would love if the media noticed that this is something that people care about. That it's not just something that happens in Instagram comments and YouTube conversations and TikToks that go viral, but that the media as a whole is like, oh, this was a cultural shift. Oh, people desire not just smut, but stories that are smutty. And we can handle that. That would be what I would love to see come out of this.
And
more
you, Jane?
risk-taking, a little more risk-taking on the part of creators like Jacob Tierney. I mean, this is such a rich source material to go into the realm of fan fiction or romance. There's so much great stuff out there, and yet it's untapped. I mean, it's like there are nuggets of gold in this mine, and for reasons that we all understand, it hasn't been adequately explored. And it doesn't need to be expensive. That's the other thing. I mean, the cost benefit is potentially quite extraordinary if they just find the right IP and then run with it.
Yeah.
Also, I just have to say this: if they, whatever budget they get, if it's a bigger budget, if they take that money and spend it on like putting people in the stands or dumb other things and not just creating more episodes, I will lose my mind.
Yeah, I think that I am hoping that what people see is that queer stories, extension stories coming from marginalized communities, are not limited by identity in terms of viewership. And so I think that it really took a lot of people by surprise, that so many people love Heated Rivalry that aren't gay men, and it didn't take Jacob Tierney by surprise. He knew his audience. But I think a lot of people outside of that were sort of like, well, how could you watch something that isn't about you, which is such a sort of like male centric point of view, right? Like you never had to, like women often have to shift
Always have to.
Yeah, right. We have to shift our sense of self to different kinds of protagonists all the time because we're rarely the protagonist. But I think that this really proves that the ability, the empathy of readers and viewers to just love a good, hot story beyond identity is like, it's unmatched. Like we have that capability in us, but you do have to you have to build it first, right? For people to come. Yeah.
For people to come. I see what you did there.
Yeah. That's why they pay me the big bucks, because I just stumbled on that organically.
Oh my God. Okay. And I thank you for mentioning that, Sierra. I'm so glad we at least touched on that a little bit, because it is a queer love story, and it got widespread. It had widespread appeal and widespread love and devotion. And that's meaningful. That matters. That will linger. That sends a signal in a really big way. So I appreciate that you called that out. Okay, I am going to wrap us up. Thank you all so much for being on this show, for engaging in this incredibly thoughtful discussion. I am going to be thinking about this for days to come. And if you're listening, I'm sure you will as well. So thank you, Meg. Thank you, Sierra. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Jane. Really appreciate your time.
That wraps up our Heated Rivalry Roundtable. Huge thanks again to our guests for such a smart, expansive conversation. If you liked this episode, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss what's next. And head on over to botheredstories.com to check out all our smutty, steamy stories. Sign up for a membership if you haven't already. That's where all the good stuff lives. I also really want to hear from you. Send me your thoughts, your questions, your hot takes, your requests for guests. Send it all to allison@botheredstories.com. And leave us a review while you're here. It helps more readers and listeners find us. Stick around too, because coming up, we've got full-length interviews with astounding best-selling authors Sierra Simone and Angelina Lopez, and you are not going to want to miss that. Thanks for getting bothered with us.